morning, everyone. On behalf of Confederation of Indian Industry, I welcome our distinguished speakers and all participants on the webinar on how AI and IoT is keeping workers safe during COVID. As we all are aware, with lifting of the lockdown and factories and offices resuming operation, it has become critical for industry to ensure their employees' safety. Moreover, companies need to build resilience in manufacturing and their supply chain. These transactions are complex. In the new normal, enterprise AI and industrial IoT technologies are driving the for worker safety, business continuity, efficiency, and productivity improvement. Keeping this in view, CII, in partnership with BLP Industry.AI, is organizing the today's webinar. The webinar would focus on application of AI products for workforce safety and how they are being deployed across industries, the benefit being seen. It also touch upon how AI and IoT is playing an integral role in driving productivity in manufacturing and supply chain in the new normal. It will also cover the deployment of these technologies and use cases. The webinar will begin with the presentation by Mr. Tejpreet Singh Chopra, CEO, BLP Group, and it will be followed by panel discussion. The panel discussion will be moderated by Ms. Priya Sehgal, Senior Executive Editor, NewsX. With this, I would like to invite Mr. Chopra to address the participant and share some innovative solution for the safety of worker. Mr. Tejpreet is the founder and CEO of Bharat Light and Power Group. Mr. Chopra's 22 years of global management and finance experience was gained in various business roles held in France, London, Hong Kong, India, and USA, of which over 14 years were at General Electric. Until 2010, Mr. Chopra was the president and CEO of GE in India, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh, and was responsible for directing GE's strategies for growth in these countries. Mr. Chopra, please. And apart from this, I also request attendee to ask question through Q&A session, which will be addressed at the end of the session. Mr. Chopra, please.
Great. No, thank you very much, Sangeeta, and thank you very much for inviting me to this panel discussion. Really honored to be part of the discussion with my colleagues, Priya, Deepak, and Rizwan. So thanks very much. What I'd like to do is very quickly share with you our insights and learnings that we've had over the last 8 to 10 weeks over this COVID period. I'll give a quick introduction about who we are, what we do in this particular company called Industry.AI, and then quickly share with you how we've applied our technologies to ensure workforce safety. So a quick background about who we are. So basically, we are an enterprise AI and IoT company. What we really do is through our platform, we collect hundreds of data points from machines all over the world, collect this data, and use AI and IoT to be able to help predict failures in machines. That, in a nutshell, is what we do, and we do it across a wide variety of industries. So we started out by doing it in the renewable space, but now we're doing it in transportation, in ports and shipping. We put little sensors and gateways in the big cranes in a port, get all the data out, and therefore improve efficiency in the port operations. We do it in large oil and gas refineries, and we digitize a whole bunch of production plants across the country by putting our sensors and gateways. In the steel industry, we use AI's algorithms to actually improve fuel efficiencies in the blast furnace and the smelting plant, and we do a lot of these solutions in the auto industry as well. In terms of the technologies and in terms of the applications of these, they really fall into 5 wide buckets. The first one is asset health and machine performance. Given our background at GE for rotating machines, we are able to actually connect multiple machines all over the world, get the data and predict failures, whether it's a wind turbine, a gas turbine, or a steam turbine. We do a lot of work on supply chain optimization. So whether it's a truck, a train, or anything that moves, in a railway wagon, for example, we put our sensors and our gateways into the railway wagon, and now we can actually optimize the movement of the railway wagon and predict when these are going to fail. and also extend the life of these railway wagons. We do a lot of focus on energy efficiency, whether they are large buildings or whether they are factories. We put sensors and gateways into the HVAC and the chillers to be able to optimize energy efficiency and sustainability in large buildings. We do a lot of work on asset tracking and inventory management. Today, we have the ability where we can put a small little spanner or a screwdriver in a 20-acre factory and find it within 30 centimeters. With that level of accuracy and the ability to track all your man, material, and machines across factories, you're able to improve productivity across factories. And lastly, we use visual analytics to be able to detect defects in manufacturing lines, especially dampener plate is missing or a bolt is actually missing. In terms of the technologies that go into a lot of this are really 6 large buckets. The first one is core AI. So we have a whole team of dedicated data scientists that actually bring in all this data, cleanse the data, and then write algorithms to be able to make sense of this data, to be able to predict failures in machines and optimize generation or optimize production of the machine. The second one is IoT. What we find is in a lot of factories, they don't have the ability to get the data out. So our team actually goes out there into the factory floor to put the sensors and the gateways to get the data out. We have obviously managed a lot of data. We do that for track and trace for trucks, whether it's ships or even trains. We have the ability to track where these machines are and a lot of work on visual analytics, which I'll share with you. This is a field right now in terms of some of the algorithms that we have developed, whether it's in the AI side or the machine learning side, and a lot of the work in terms of computer vision, in terms of predicting what's happening. I hope everybody can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can, TP.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Priya. So now moving on to the here and now. About 8-9 weeks ago, a couple of large corporations came to us and said, can we put our heads together to apply all these technologies to keep our workforce safe and ensure business continuity? In the times we are living right now, a lot of these large corporates are having a really hard time figuring out how to plan their production systems, given the fact that they don't know how many people are going to come to work every day. That's number one. Number two is, in a time of crisis, employees will always remember what management and CEOs do to keep them safe. And three, it's a confidence issue. How do we ensure whether we can give that confidence to all our staff members, our colleagues, and team members to return to the factory floor to ensure we get the factories going again? So with that background, we started thinking about how do we adapt all these technologies to keep all our workforce safe and ensure industry gets back on our feet. So we started thinking about working with these large corporations, and we sort of came up with 6 key areas that people are really focusing on. The first one is social distancing. The second one is masks and safety gear. How do we ensure people on the workforce or the factory are wearing masks? The third one is temperature tracking. The fourth one is declaration, and the declaration could be something that the central government wants or the state government wants or the corporation's own requirements as to whether the person came across somebody else who has temperature or came across somebody else who was actually went to a place that was a containment zone. The fifth one is contact tracing. And the sixth one is an audit trail, so that if there's any audit from the government, you have an ability to trace back what the steps you've taken to keep all the employees safe. So just moving on very quickly to the 3 technologies that we have rolled out across a large number of factories all across India, and now beginning to roll it out in the United States and Europe as well. The first technology is called Trust AI. Prior to us getting into the Corona world, what we could do is connect any camera, and it doesn't matter, there's no new capex, no new investment, and no new cameras are required. Any existing camera that exists on a factory floor, in a mall, in a public space, we could take all that data and run it through our computer vision models and send out alerts when people are not wearing helmets or safety jackets. So that is what we would do in a pre-Corona world. What we did in the last 8 to 10 weeks is to get and develop our neural network models and mathematical models to detect social distancing, which is actually very difficult to do because these cameras that are usually were installed 5 years or 10 years ago, and they were actually installed for security purposes, not to detect social distancing, and therefore it was a bit difficult. But now we are able to detect when social distancing gets breached, and therefore immediately send out an alert to the safety officer or the health officer when an alert is actually breached. And we're rolling it out across airports and factories all over the place. So how do we connect? A lot of people keep asking me. So very simply, we take any existing camera feed or thermal feed that already exists on the factory floor or in a building. We connect that to what we call the BLP edge. That is the brains. That is how we've trained these computer models to think like humans and see the way humans would see, analyze that data, and through the cloud, we would then send out an alert. At the back end, we have an AI application that the health officer has access to, where all these alerts are recorded. And you can then track whether they're repeat offenders or whether it's the same person, are there hotspots being created. And some factories have come up with some really interesting solutions where it's more like a nudge. So they put big TV screens across the factory floor so that when these alerts are generated, it shows up. So people can look at the factory and see yourself on the camera to warn themselves to look after themselves and the people around. Let me just show you right now a quick feed from one of the actual camera live feeds from a factory floor in a cement factory, where you can actually see someone. You can actually see the computer vision models picking up people out there in green wearing helmets and safety jackets. You will see in a few seconds from now, when the camera turns to the other side, you will see people out there who are not wearing helmets and safety jackets show up in white. So that's what happens. And then immediately the alert is sent out to the safety officer to show him that the person is not wearing a helmet or a safety jacket. But what's been fascinating is in the last 8 weeks, the applications of this technology have gone up 10 times. People now want us to detect when there's a fire or when there's smoke or when somebody falls down. So you can now train these models for many other applications in the real world going forward. This is another example at one of the large auto companies where this is for detecting social distancing. Now, the reason this is very difficult is the fact, like I mentioned, the cameras were not installed for this purpose. So what we've done with these mathematical models is to create a marker, and from the marker, you actually create these distances, which actually calculate social distancing breaches, and then the alert is sent out to the safety officer, so some actions can be taken immediately. So this is a good live example where we can then track and change human behavior so that everybody can stay safe. The third video I'm going to show you is actually in one of the large steel factories where you can actually see people coming in to detect masks. So as people are walking in, you can see people who are wearing masks. And therefore, what we found in a lot of factories was that in some factories, people wear the mask while they're walking in, but after they go into the factory, they take off the mask. So this way, using cameras, we're able to detect that. But also a lot of times what we're finding is in some factories, there are usually about 10 to 20 security guards staring at about 60 TV screens to see when actual faults are happening. What we are actually being able to do is reduce the head count of these security guards. Rather than 15 people look at TV screens, computers can do all that thinking, and the security guards can do some other work as well. So I'll just quickly move on to the second application. One of the largest FMCG companies came to us and said, listen, what in some of our factories, we don't have cameras. Two, we need a really low cost solution in this time because visitors into our factories. These are truck drivers and labor who come in for loading, unloading. How do we keep everybody safe? So we came up with an innovative technology to make cell phones communicate with each other. It doesn't matter whether it's an Android phone, a Huawei, or a Samsung, or an iPhone. When two phones come within 2 meters, they both vibrate and send out an alarm. And it's sort of the best analogy I've heard so far is like your car. When you put your car in reverse gear and you're going to hit the wall, it suddenly sends out a loud alarm. So just like that, when two phones come very close, it vibrates and sends out a really loud alarm to both the people. So it's an active defense system, which is here and now, rather than a passive system that warns you much later on. But one of the critical elements for all these multinationals and Indian corporations was privacy. So we spent a lot of time sort of figuring out how do we address this issue. So the way we've designed the system is that we don't track people when they get out of the factory. So the system only works when people are within the factory floor or within the four walls of the factory or within the office. And that's how we've addressed the system. So once you leave the factory, you are completely anonymous again, even within the factory. Despite the fact that we might know each other, in both our phones, it is completely anonymous and it's not logged in. So very quickly, how it actually works is that when you put in your login ID and your name, and when people come close, you can see out there that the buzzer and the scanning system, when two people come within 2 meters, the scanning system detects the other phone and immediately it goes to red. But what we are also able to do is create a risk score based on certain questions that the company asks all its staff. Immediately it creates the risk score so you can see the risk factor out there that turns to red. If you are living in a containment zone, it turns to red. If you come across somebody who has corona, if you've got temperature, so based on a number of parameters, that goes up to red. But one of the most important points for this large FMCG company was they've got over 80,000 employees, was how do you create an early warning system before the person gets corona? So what we've done is worked out a system where now we are tracking temperature of all their staff every 3 hours and entering it into the system. So therefore, if one person starts showing early symptoms of temperature or corona, immediately it's logged into the system, and then using AI keeps analyzing all this data. So what we can do is then analyze when someone gets temperature. Some companies also wanted to create a contactless attendance system. So what we did was created a QR code where the QR code is just scanned as you walk in, and immediately it's established into the back end where the whole contactless attendance system is taken. But the real IP of this whole system is that at the back end, the only person who has access to the data is the safety officer, the one health officer of that factory, because everybody knows him and he knows everybody. So he gets access to the system where he can see these alerts when somebody shows early signs of corona. And then using contact tracing over the last 5 days, 10 days, 20 days, you can actually trace back if that one person came across somebody, 400 people in 20 days, you can actually find out which are those 5 or 10 people who are actually going to be the highest probability, the probability is going to be the highest for them to contract corona as well. So that's what we've done is using contact tracing, you can trace back who are those 10 people and take them out of the factory or the production line or the office. So very quickly, I'll move on to the third technology, especially to address the concern that in some factories, you're not allowed to take cell phones. In some factories, you don't have cameras. And in some factories, you don't have cameras on the factory floor. So what do you do in that situation? So in that situation, we came up with a third technology using wearable bands. So what we do is give everybody a little wearable band, like a Fitbit looking band or a little ID, so that when two people come within a certain distance, the Fitbit vibrates or your ID card vibrates. But this technology actually is really the real use of the technology is to drive operational efficiencies or to drive workforce productivity. So what we do is if you have a factory with 50,000 people, by wearing these bands, you are able to track man, material, work in progress, tooling, machinery, forklifts, and even your staff to sort of coordinate how these people are moving to then put in place productivity elements to drive workforce productivity. But therefore, now the technology not only works on factory floors and warehouses, but also in the office spaces, especially for geofencing. So in a large steel factory, if somebody comes close to a dangerous zone, immediately it sends out a warning. Or in a port, if somebody falls into the water, immediately it sends out an alert because you're wearing the Fitbit on your hand. So basically what we do in terms of tech architecture, we put these little boxes on the roof of your factory based on the size of it. And then you have different tags. You can even have that you put on your tooling or your screwdriver. And through these tags, you're able to monitor the movement of these devices. At the back end, you have an application that looks like this, which connects to your SAP system, where now what you can do is actually track goods in, goods out, and improve productivity by 50–60%. Because in the old days, you would use RFID and barcodes, and now with these new tags, they have sub 1 second latency. So therefore, finding one of these tags is virtually instantaneous. So that's what's happening in the world of technology. What we've also done in the last 3 weeks to find even lower cost wearable solutions where you don't even need all this tech infrastructure to be installed. With just some of these bands, you're able to actually use these just for social distancing in the offices. So what we're able to do is not only provide it for large factories, but also in offices. So just very quickly, I want to wrap it up. So really a couple of key points. These technologies are predictive technologies. In other words, rather than wait for the problems to happen, you're able to prevent the spread of corona. Two, they're really low-cost technologies. So these are good for companies that are very small MSMEs, all the way through to multi-billion-dollar companies and global MNCs. And we've been able to now deploy it not only in India, but being locked up at home, we can provide these technologies across the world and connect the world all over the world. So as I said, we're really excited about this because at the end of the day, we are changing human behavior and really going a long way to protect lives. So with that, Priya, thanks a lot, and I'm going to turn it over to you. Priya, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, Priya, we can hear you now.
Okay, I'm so sorry. So thank you, as I was saying, thank you for a very comprehensive overview of what you have been doing and what to expect really, because we are now living in a post-lockdown world, but also a COVID continuous world. So in that sense, how do we prepare ourselves? How do we, get back to the business of livelihood and not just lives? So that balance, I think for that, we need new age technology, cutting edge technology. We need artificial intelligence, industrial IoT, which is something I think the reason why CII and BLP have organized this webinar. I think it's a need of the hour. So thank you. And quickly, let me introduce the other panelists also. Joining us on the discussion is Rizwan Sumar. He is the CEO and Managing Director at DP World. And Rizwan is actually responsible for driving the company's journey from ports to an integrated logistics player in India. He himself is an accomplished industry leader with a career spanning over 2 decades in ports and the logistics sector. And has a special understanding of the Asia-Pacific region because prior to joining DP World, he also headed the South Asian portfolio of APM Terminal as Singapore as Vice President. Also joining us is Deepak Ajnani. He is the country head and the corporate business, Google Cloud India. Deepak's part of the executive leadership team at Google Cloud India. His team engages with customers to increase market awareness and ensure customer success on Google Cloud. He's an industry veteran with over 22 years of experience working with companies such as Oracle Foundation and Dell. And Deepak has also been a co-founder of a successful startup that provides on new age technology on social mobile analytics and cloud technologies. So welcome Deepak, Rizwan, and of course Tejpreet, all three of you. In fact, Tejpreet, your 22 years of your experience, but it's really the 7-8 years that has been crucial for us. 7-8 weeks, what you've been doing is going to be crucial for this discussion. Before I come to you, I want to bring in Deepak with the conversation. I want to begin with Deepak. Deepak, you and BLP have, there is a partnership. So can you tell us a bit about your partnership between BLP and Google Cloud, and how is this helping organizations transform their business in, as I said, a post-COVID, COVID continuous world rather? Deepak. I think Deepak is not here. Is he? Deepak with us?
I think his screen has frozen.
Can I then begin with you, Rizwan?
Sure, Priya, go ahead.
So Rizwan, as I said, DP Ports, you've begun business post-lockdown. So what are the key workforce safety issues that you are facing? And also, what are the technology that you feel will help you resolve these issues? What have you been using? What have you been doing? Can you share your experience with us?
Yeah, thanks, Priya. Thanks for the opportunity. Good afternoon, everybody. DP World is essentially a logistics player. We are actually in the ports industry, handling almost more than 1/4 of the country's containerized EXIM trade. So a lot of volume handled through our 6 terminals all across India: Mundra, Sheva, Chennai, Cochin, because we are in services, we were actually operational throughout the COVID period from the time it started in March, late March, when the lockdown started, and we started reacting in terms of trying to contain the spread of the virus per se, right? We had to have a huge challenge to actually keep our people safe and give them the assurance that they're safe so that they could actually come to work. For example, in Navasheva or Chennai or other places that we operate 80 places all across India. The challenge was to essentially assure our employees that they will essentially, both in terms of coming to work, but also at work in that sense. And so obviously, it's about putting processes in place, safety protocols in place, extremely strict ones, right? One was, of course, administered by the government that we had to follow, but it was also our own safety protocols in place as a global MNC, which were actually a lot more stringent to assure our employees that they were actually always safe at coming to work, but also at work in that, right? And these processes then have to be automated and governed with the help of technology in that sense, right? So we're in discussion with Tejpreet, Mr. Tejpreet Chopra and his company, among others, to see how we can actually systemize some of these processes so that, there is even more certainty that is actually built in, so that people are even more assured, both in terms of the management who are operating these facilities, but also the employees and their families in that sense, and also communities in that sense, because in some instances, we have to also connect our communities around the facilities that, it is okay to keep our facility operational, that we're taking all those steps to make sure that people are safe, and that essentially we will ensure that the safety protocols are also tuned to the challenge of the times as the virus spreads or does not for that matter. So I think that was a big challenge in terms of keeping the business continuity alive. The second is obviously about that this is completely new to all of us, right? I mean, this is so unprecedented. I mean, this word has been used so many times, right? That, all of us were actually also discovering that what are the things that we need to do in terms of both proaction as well as reaction to ensure that these safety protocols are actually maintained, right? And the customers, communities, everybody are actually assured at all times that we are doing the right thing, not just business continuity for the sake of it, but also ensuring that the business continuity is done in the right way, per se, right? So 50 of our leaders all across India used to jump on a call every day for 2 hours, sharing good practices, sharing best practices, formulating these safety protocols, learning from each other. This is critically important to ensure that, we are able to actually form the right processes on the ground that actually work. And then that feedback is also obtained from the ground to make sure that these processes are actually standardized as much as possible all across India, trying to counter the many issues that we actually face in terms of keeping the business going. So I think that was the second point. And then, of course, it cannot be actually done via, without these virtual mediums, right? Like the way we're having right now, this meeting. We had just implemented our video conferencing system last year, and we were still tinkering with it when this COVID situation hit us. So we all kind of blessed each other, saying that, listen, it was good that we actually, implemented this new video conferencing system so that, we could have these meetings on a daily basis and actually learn from each other and have this mechanism in place that we learn from each other. So I think that was the second point that I would like to mention about, how the management essentially got together to help the employees on the ground and the colleagues on the ground to stay safe, right? The third is obviously about government protocols, right? I mean, it was also our duty as the foremost logistics service provider in the country to essentially also advise and also actually discuss with the government on a daily basis as to what are some of the circulars that need to actually come in place, what are some of the directives that need to come in place, because we're in the business of moving trucks all across India, we're in the business of actually handling ships. In one instance, for example, Priya, we had a ship coming in from China, and there was a directive that was actually coming out that the ship essentially has to be quarantined for 14 days outside. And only when the tests were all negative, could the ship be actually allowed in the terminal. Now, this would have been disastrous for the trade, but obviously this was actually the right measure that the government thought at that moment of time. So we had to actually then pool in our resources, our DP World global resources, to put things together, to put some of the best practices together from global operations, and essentially then come up with a SOP or a standard operating procedure, which essentially would keep the crew safe, keep the people actually who come into contact with the crew at the terminal safe, and ensure that we are able to actually convince all our employees and colleagues that the ship coming in is not of any threat in terms of the crew carrying the virus, and how we can protect ourselves. So there are several examples of that sort where the safety protocols that were actually developed also were developed in conjunction with the government and partnering with the government in that sense. So I think that was the third point that I would like to say. Quite obviously, COVID aside, and in the post-COVID world, we need to also work to make sure that the processes are sustainable. But if you look at the threats to the logistics in the port business from a safety perspective overall, right? It's the man-machine interface. We carry cargo in containers, and these containers could weigh up to 30 tons, right? Obviously, you need a lot of heavy equipment to lift this container, put it on a ship, get it off the ship, put it on a truck, put it on a train. And so there is a lot of heavy equipment at play at our facilities in that sense, right? So it is critically important that we keep pedestrians, we keep people as apart as possible from these moving machines, which obviously the threat is quite obvious in terms of it could pose to people, right? When it moves and people come in the way, for example, or if there's a suspended load and it falls, on an unsuspecting individual. So that is the foremost concern where safety is concerned, where our business is concerned in that sense, right? So how do we keep and how do we make sure that the processes are actually on the ground that work, which actually keep as less people at the workplace as possible, as many people indoors in safe designated areas as possible, and make sure that these processes are then governed with the help of technology. So one of the technologies that we actually worked with last year was, video analytics in that sense. So we put 35 cameras all across our port, for example. These 35 cameras were put in places where the risk was highest in terms of pedestrians or people actually coming in the way of equipment. The data that actually came in from these cameras were then analyzed. Rules were put in place in terms of overspeeding of trucks, for example. If a truck actually goes beyond 20 kilometers an hour, which is the designated speed, then the camera would essentially capture that exception because it has been programmed to do so. And these exceptions are then real-time flashed, as an announcement on the PA system, so that that truck driver is warned immediately, so that the unsafe act is stopped immediately in that sense, right? So that is one of the things that came out of this. Priya, I think you're speaking, but I can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
So I was saying good old naming and shaming always works, but
yes, it does. No, it does actually, and then this PA system was very effective in stopping that unsafe operation immediately, actually, right? So that was one, because the sound gets across faster than a person would get across to that particular location, right? So I think that was one thing that we did, and there are many other interventions that were actually put in place, like patrolling jeeps in the terminal, where that the jeep could actually go across and stop that unsafe operation because it has been highlighted. So the second thing that we would do is this data that actually comes in from the system, right, is then analyzed to actually improve the underlying process. So, for example, why did the truck driver speed, right? Was it because he or she had an incentive, right, or a bonus or something like that? That basically the person was chasing from a production which he or she was speeding. So those are underlying causes and root causes that essentially would analyze data that we actually get from the virtual feed from the camera in that, right, which actually then helps to improve the process going forward even more so. So that was one thing that we put in place. And then, of course, from a post-COVID situation, I think there's a little bit of a disturbance. Possibly somebody's mic is on and not muted in that sense. Okay, thank you. So another application of the video analytics, these 35 cameras that we put in, is social distancing in that sense, right? And as my colleague HP from the panel said, that if two people come like 2 meters of distance of each other, right, the camera is kind of positioned to give you that alert again, saying that you come close. So the social distancing can be policed in that sense. So I think what technology does, it helps to govern the underlying process. The process is very important, but it helps to actually govern the underlying process. So I think that's the first part, right? The second is, of course, that when you look at our gates, of the terminal, where a lot of cargo actually is waiting to come in, right? There was always a bunching of trucks, and when there's a bunching of trucks and when there is a delay that is actually seen, the truck drivers have a tendency to get down, and when they get down, and there are trucks that are actually moving in the proximity, there is danger to these truck drivers in that sense, right? So what we did was we automated the entire process, so there was no queue, there was no waiting time. And with the help of RFID, for example, as a technology, RFID on the trucks, and with the help of optical character recognition, right? These cameras, these special cameras that could actually read the signs on the container and the truck, so that you could actually match it in the system with what your shipper has actually given to you earlier, so that you don't have to do any physical checking of the cargo or the physical checking of a truck in that sense, which was the case earlier. You had customs, you had a lot of people, a lot of agencies who had to actually police what cargo is coming into the container in that sense, right? And actually pass on that information to the various systems. So we actually automate the whole process with the help of OCR and with the help of RFID in that sense. And that really helped a lot to actually improve the underlying process, but also to make it safe so that our people are not in the way of the trucks per se, right? So I think that was the second example, Priya, that I can share with you. Sorry, we can't hear you again, Priya. Could you repeat that question, Priya?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, please, clearly. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm going to just cut you short a bit and get the others in also and come back to you, unless if you can quickly. Deepak, I wanted to just ask you if you can hear me.
I can.
You...
Sorry about the disturbance before.
We're all going through technology. It's part of the new normal, I think. So I just wanted to share with you, if you can share with us, a brief about your partnership with BLP and Google Cloud and how you are helping organizations transform their business. You've heard Rizwan's pitch, he's also, for him, safety is a big thing, as it is for everyone, especially in his field. So, and now we have to also keep safe from COVID. So how are you going to help us do that?
Sure. Now, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about the partnership that we have with BLP, and I really thank TP for inviting me to this panel, and thanks, Rizwan, for those great insights. So this partnership that we have with BLP, especially Industry.AI and Google Cloud, it is to work with enterprises across various sectors like manufacturing, transportation, energy, utilities, to increase ROI and optimize the cost. Now, when BLP Industry.AI uses Google Cloud Platform as its preferred platform, they're effectively talking about using the whole IoT and AI platform, Orion, and the edge software that runs on Google Cloud. So effectively, what we're saying is that the technology that powers these solutions that TP spoke about is run on Google Cloud, and effectively what it means is that it can manage an amount of scale, a petabyte scale data, real-time analytics. We can obviously work and deploy and develop AI-based application for a large range of transformative use cases such as asset health, predictive maintenance, inventory optimization, supply chain optimization. So there are a number of use cases that are available, even visual analytics solutions like PPE compliance, safety and detection. You saw the video that TP presented, a very interesting one. So through the Orion platform, we're talking about monitoring, reporting, predictive intelligence solutions across industries all over the globe. And through Industry.AI's report control center in Bangalore, the company can leverage big data, cloud mobility, and advanced analytics to help customers build smart operations. So effectively, this partnership is very crucial for Google and for BLP to take this solution to the market to ensure workforce safety and provide intelligence to safety officers around the world to make sure that their employees are protected not just from from disease, but also from to make sure that at least there is some early warning system in place that can help them to stay safe.
Thank you. Tejpreet, if you would also, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
Sorry. If you can tell us how, BLP, a little bit more about what you've been doing specifically, and if you have some anecdotes of, that would help. Don't have to name the industry, but whether it's in the automobile work or even say in the ports sector, Rizwan has raised some key issues. He's already using artificial intelligence for physical safety, but now we have the COVID angle added also. So if you can help us explain this with some anecdotes and some examples of what you've been doing so far, that would help.
Yeah. No, Priya, thanks so much for that. I think I'll just start by saying this. Corona has made the world very human, right? It's absolutely amazing to see how corporations from around the world, competitors, companies have come together in a time of crisis to help each other to resolve problems. I don't have all the solutions to all the problems, and I don't think any corporation in the world has it. And I think one thing I've seen in this last 10 weeks, the collaboration of large corporations and competitors to come together and share information openly, to solve problems has been absolutely outstanding. Our own journey in developing these applications and solutions, for example, the Ask Pro application, was really a collaboration with this FMCG company where we would never produce a product so quickly. We were really scared of releasing a product which we know hadn't been tested and did not go through the usual process. And same way, we were pushing the Google team because we weren't sure whether they were ready. So, it was a lot of uncertainty. But I think in this time of crisis, all of us came together and literally we would roll out the product. They were tested out actually in a factory in the daytime. At nighttime, they'd give us feedback. We'd redo the product, and the next morning we'd roll it out again. And this process kept happening week and day and night after time to come out with something. So I must just say it's been just an incredible collaboration of companies coming together in the time of the biggest crisis. And at the end of the day, it just shows how human all of us are. The second point I'll just say is completely agree with what Rizwan was saying. The realization that today the power of computer vision models and AI, it was not really in your face till now. It's only now when companies are seeing what you can do with just a dumb camera that was put out there just to look at for security purposes, how you can make a dumb camera smart. How can you make a dumb camera think like the human mind? How do we detect? How do we see? So the examples that Rizwan mentioned are absolutely spot on. That if we can use these dumb cameras now to get more ROI out of it, to ensure how you detect the number plate of a truck, to detect where the truck is moving, and more importantly, the example that Rizwan talked about, which is what if can we send out an alert if a truck driver gets out of his truck, which is a disastrous situation in a port operation. So those are real life examples of the use of computer vision models without investing new money, but you get an increased return on your investments. And let me just share one more example. We today have the ability in my own, we have all our wind turbines and solar farms until one day, one of my wind turbines burned down to ashes, right? And we buy all our turbines from all the usual big OEMs like GE, Vestas, Siemens, and all the huge large suppliers. But when that turbine burned down to ashes, I realized that we had to do something differently. And that's when we started monitoring hundreds of tags of data from our turbines onto our platform, which is also housed on Google Cloud. And therefore, processing all that data real time, we were able to immediately predict many hours before it went down, whether there's a failure in a gearbox, a generator, a bearing, or a blade, which therefore improved the machine availability of all our turbines. And therefore, now we're doing it for large utilities all over the world, whether it's in France, Germany, Spain, Italy. We're monitoring and evaluating and analyzing tons of data from all these turbines to improve machine uptime. So therefore, I think, Priya, that it's not only about a today and a here and now, about keeping people safe and keeping people well and protecting lives, but it's really about how do we leverage all these new technologies in a new world to really drive productivity, where we are all going to be challenged over the next year or two. It's going to be extremely difficult, but I really believe we have an opportunity now to leverage these technologies to disrupt the way business is run going forward.
Fair enough, TB. In fact, you've actually taken the next question, which is going forward, because hopefully there will be a world without COVID also. So how are we going to, and the technology that you are developing, people are installing it, then they would also want it to be there as a permanent solution and not just a temporary fix. So Rizwan, as another thing that Tejpreet mentioned was that he's using new technology with old assets, like your cameras are already there. So have you, how have you adapted those to make them also as COVID guards, to use them to warn you, or how do you handle the COVID situation in terms of that? Using your old technology, or have you had to actually look for new technology, new asset, had to invest more in that? Rizwan.
So I think the way I see it, Priya, and thanks Tejpreet for those insights. The way I see it is that the underlying process is very important. What is the value that you're actually trying to add to a customer or to a stakeholder or to an employee or to your colleague or whatever, right? The underlying process is very important. So, for example, tuna fish, when it's imported from Japan in various countries per se, right? The value of the tuna fish is basis the data surrounding the carriage of tuna fish, right from the time it was actually caught in the sea till the time it actually reaches that market that it is intended to, right? The information as to how it was handled, the information in terms of how it was packed, how many people actually touched it, for example, et cetera, determines the value of the final product, right? So data and monitoring that data, capturing the data, and making the data available together with the tuna fish was what determined the value of the tuna fish in that sense, right? I mean, if I just relate that example to the situation right now in these times, right? Customers now who are importing goods, it could be anything, right? They actually want to know who has touched the product from the time it was manufactured till the time it reaches the consumption point, right? They want to know that actually. So again, this information is only available if you can actually have a blockchain kind of a technology that governs this data capturing, but also this data availability in that sense. So I think that is one piece that I would like to share with you, one example that I would like to share with you, that this is the trend that you will see in logistics going forward, where importers and people who actually buy goods from other countries would actually want to know this data together with the goods that they actually import. Now, of course, this was always there. I mean, the tuna fish example is an age-old example per se, right? And now the blockchain technology has made it possible for this data to actually be made available. However, in these times, the digitized trends like blockchain technology being used in for cases other than tuna fish is going to be accelerated in that sense, right? So, the digitization that the companies were thinking would take 5 years is now going to be done in the next 6 months, right? Like the way Tejpreet also shared with us, right? I mean, he had to actually really, really quickly put this technology in place to solve some of the real life issues that companies actually faced. So you will actually see a huge upsurge in terms of the digitization piece. You will see a lot of upsurge in terms of the trends like contactless handling of cargo and the user technology to actually make that happen. So I see more of that actually going to happen going forward, per se, right? You look at warehouses, for example, are going to be more automated. That doesn't mean people will lose their jobs, but they have to learn new skill sets in order to make sure that the contactless warehousing is eventually done for customers, right? So you will see a lot of this trend. And I can go on and on. I have several examples, but for the paucity of time, and I'll wait for the question if there is. But go ahead.
No, thank you. Yeah, no, in fact, I'd love to hear more examples. If we have time, I'm going to come back and ask you. But
Sure.
Deepak, Google Cloud is also known for its cutting edge technology, around AI and ML. So can you share also some more, a few examples of how you are helping? Basically, what I find in these discussions is anecdotal, like, he told us the example of tuna fish. So these are the kind of examples, real time, which help people identify as to what you're doing. So can you make AI simple for us and tell us what you've been doing?
No, sure, absolutely. Thanks, Priya. So one of the larger goals for Google Cloud is to help commoditize AI responsibly so that it's everybody, a business user, a developer, or any expert who could use AI very, very effectively. I'm actually going to take three examples. I'm going to move a little away from the manufacturing and some of the larger industrial automation pieces and talk a little bit about three verticals where we are providing workforce safety. For example, one of the use cases that we've been working on is with a financial services company who are keeping their workforce safe, from making sure that all the KYC process is done in a contactless way through video KYC solutions. And they're using AI technologies for vision, video, and speech intelligence to make sure that the workforce does not have to interact with humans on a one-to-one basis, but can actually complete the whole eKYC process more effectively without the need for that sort of human interaction, right? So that's important. Another
Something
use
like
case
our
that
income tax plans that they have for us filing our income tax, the faceless interactions.
I hope so. I think we'll get there. I think a video and a analytical solution absolutely can make that possible, so long as our officials are hearing this. The second use case I'd like to talk about is the property management side, right? That's another area where we see a lot of interaction, a lot of movement of people. And there we've seen one of our customers using cloud speech to text API, using mobile phone cameras to be able to automate and streamline the whole apartment inspection. So we're no longer talking about, physically installed cameras anymore. We're talking about mobile phone cameras now being used on a handheld basis to be able to do apartment inspections for people who are interested in buying property. A third example I could use for workforce safety is in the area of retail tech, where we are seeing people instead of going into stores just be able to sort of look at the pictures on a catalog and just do contactless commerce, where they don't really have to sort of physically touch and feel the solution, but WhatsApp images of those solutions are sent out to customers where they can pick and choose. Pretty similar to
How
what
is
we
it
see on
different?
the online shopping.
Yeah, how is it
On the
different from
online
e-commerce?
Yeah, it's different because here the entire experience is about, it's like an AR VR sort of a store, right? Where you actually walk into a store, you can see the clothes hanging, and you can actually sort of visualize how it will look like on you, what color would look better on you, what size would fit you better. So you can actually do a whole lot of the customization through video intelligence and with the help of auto ML. So we have these solutions for auto ML and cloud ML, right? So these are potential areas which will revolutionize the way we actually use AI ML in the future, not just in manufacturing and industrial automation and ports, but also on a day-to-day health tech, retail tech, edutech, these kind of areas where workforces can remain safe, can maintain social distance, and can use handheld devices to be able to interact with their customers. They don't really need to sort of go and reinvest something again in infrastructure, increasing the capex. I hope that answers some of the questions on the use cases.
No, very interesting. And in fact, I think what you're going to do is make e-commerce more personal and more intimate as much as you can without actually physically going there. Thanks. That's was a very helpful answer. Tejpi, to take on from further what Deepak has said, let's look at the future of these technologies. He's given us examples of the retail sector, property sector. Where else do you see them? I know you've done a lot of work in solar and renewable energy. You hinted a bit at that. How are you going to be using AI on that? I think. Could you hear me? Stage
Hi.
speed there?
Yeah, I put it on mute. I think going forward, Priya, I think the world of technology is changing, in my view, because of 5 reasons, right? And I'm talking more from a industry side, manufacturing side, rather than the retail side, because I don't understand e-commerce and retail, but I come from a manufacturing world, so I understand the manufacturing and industrial world. I think it's changing so rapidly for 5 reasons. The first one is cloud. Today, everybody, the point that Deepak was just mentioning, the cloud is available to everybody. And it's the same cloud for you, for me, for all of us, whether it is Google or AWS or any of the other guys, it's the same cloud for the world.
Whether
right?
it's in India or China, it's the same cloud.
Well, I don't know about that, and who's going to catch that. But
you gave Hawaii as one of your
cloud.
examples. I was going to catch you on that one. You gave me another opportunity. Sorry.
Fair point. Fair point. So the first one is the cloud. The second one is sensor costs. Sensor costs have come down dramatically over the last 5, 6 years, 7 years. So that is now making it more affordable. So when Rizwan goes to digitize that crane of his, that costs, I don't know, 10, $15 million, the cost of that sensor that we can put in the trolley or the hoist has come down significantly to make it more affordable for him to consider doing a solution, even relative to the cost. So the second one is sensor cost. The third one is mobility. I think all of us know the revolution happening in telecom around the world, that the cost of getting data from any corner of the world to Bangalore to any other part of the world, think about it. We are getting data from turbines on the hilltop of Romania, Sweden, Italy, from some really godforsaken hilltop with no connectivity. We're able to get the data out. So mobility is becoming much easier given the advancements now. And I think 5G will take it to another level of advancements as well. The fourth one, high performance compute. In the old days, high performance compute was only the domain of a few large IT companies, and everybody knows all the big brands and companies that existed. But today,
explain what it means.
Yeah, so if you think about, IBM's Watson, for example, or any of these large computers had these large, very, very powerful computers that could actually do a lot of compute simultaneously and instantaneously. That level, because of the sophistication of the speed, the processing speeds, and the access to this high performance compute, sort of like what Deepak said, he's put all of that into one bundle in Google Cloud. So therefore, I don't need to get all that. I just go to one Google and I say, guys, I need the compute, I need the storage, I need all these other tools. So it's made it more easier and more commoditized for people like us in industry to use that technology. So the fourth one is high performance compute. And the fifth point, Priya, that I get really excited about is that I really do believe that in this time of disruption in manufacturing and supply chain around the world, we guys in India have a real opportunity to become the IT service center for the world because of all these other reasons I mentioned. Today, sitting at home, we have connected hundreds and thousands of cameras around the world. Sitting at home, we've been able to connect factories around the world, and we haven't been able to step out. So I just feel that given this new world of work from home, the fact that we're all having this dialogue in all different parts of the country is going to change the way we do work, and also gives us an opportunity in terms of applying technology in manufacturing and industry going forward. So I think I can go on with other examples, Priya, whether it's to do with digitizing of trains, of railway wagons, of seeing how wagons are moving around, to seeing what the brake pads on the wagon, are those wearing out or not, to seeing whether the axle load on the railway wagon, are they wearing, if there's a certain limit of loads on a railway wagon, are the users of the wagon overloading it or not. So these are actual impacts on safety, utilization, productivity. So that's what we can do with data. Once we have all that data, how do we make decisions in real time and change the way we do it? But I'll just say this, Priya, that the cost points of all these technologies is coming down to the point where it's becoming affordable for small little MSME companies and the large corporations as well. And that's what's super exciting about it right now. So these are the reasons I think, Priya, that I'm really excited about the way industry is going to transform. And those companies that don't do it are going to be in a competitive disadvantage going forward.
Fair enough. I think Rizwan, in fact, people who don't do it will be at a disadvantage. So what else, how are future technologies being used in logistics? Can you think of more examples as to how it can be used?
No, absolutely. So I think what Tejpreet mentioned, right? The sensors have become a lot more affordable. So it was not that the sensor technology was not there earlier, but now of course it has become more affordable. So one can actually scale it up in terms of across the portfolio, etc. Right? For example, what Tejpreet mentioned that we're putting sensors on rail wagons from a safety perspective, from ensuring that there is predictive maintenance, etc. Right? Longer use of our spare parts, etc. So we put sensors on rail wagons, and BLP is also helping us on that. We put sensors on our trains to do more effective predictive maintenance, to the certainty of the train being available for operation per se, right? So there are several examples of sensor, IoT, high-speed computing, etc., to be actually used in real life examples per se, right? But then, of course, there's also something more to look forward to, right? So, for example, DP World is essentially the biggest investor in the Hyperloop technology, right? Which is, you must have possibly read about this in the papers that we are actually putting up the Hyperloop connectivity between Bombay and Pune. The travel time between Bombay and Pune can be reduced to 30 minutes because this goes at a very, very fast speed, right? So it is for cargo as well as for passengers, right? India would probably be one of the first places where this could be accessible. But obviously, the safety angle to it, the new technology, I mean, all those are now being put in place. It is already tested in the States. So we have that prototype functioning, but this can revolutionize mobility in the country for us, right? Because it's not just Maharashtra where we will implement this, it's other parts of India. Other states are also very eager for this to be connecting their cities per se. Completely revolutionize the way when passengers are moved and how cities can actually come much closer to each other in terms of both commerce as well as people, right? So this is one. The second example is within our terminals. Right? I mean, we have capacity in terms of how much cargo we can handle in the terminal. Right? So that is actually a function of how much space is there in the terminal for cargo. So what we've done is with that pain point and with that opportunity, instead of actually stacking containers one on top of the other, and you can only go to 5 high. Some of these containers is about 8 feet high. We've actually got a racking system in place, which is now being piloted, where it can go 11 high. Make the capacity almost 2 per se, right? And more importantly, this is a racking system where a container can be actually picked out at will, depending on the sequence on which it is supposed to be loaded onto the particular ship, right? So therefore, and then of course this container is picked out from this rack. So it could be a 5 high container. There could be 4 more containers on top of it, and this could be actually picked out at will. This could be actually put automated way on a autonomous guided vehicle. So you don't need to have a truck driver and a truck,
Yeah.
to meet that load. And it can go to the right place alongside the ship and actually get loaded onto the particular ship. Everything is essentially, done automatically with the help of systems guiding it. And so therefore there will be number of people in the terminal, which will essentially be at a safety risk. So this is
Okay.
another technology that we're actually piloting, which will actually, and then of course we've got autonomous patrolling vehicles and all sorts of other, applications that we've actually tested out as well.
Okay. I'm going to cut you short quickly. I want to bring in Deepak before we throw open the floor to questions. Deepak, you had me on retail, but can you help me with other sectors, and which did you find was the most challenging sector really to integrate in the world, artificial intelligence? In the last 2 months, there must have been a whole lot of queries coming up. So where did you find your biggest challenges?
I don't think there's any sector I can think of where we cannot use AI. I think it's pervasive. It's going to be like
I gave
electricity,
you
right?
your marketing pitch,
Eh,
did I?
No, it is true because I can't think of an industry where AI cannot be used. And I always kind of go back to what we've been talking about the use of AI as we move forward, whether it's industrial automation, whether it is the way we do business. I think it is going to be like electricity. It's going to be a necessity. What Wi-Fi is today, AI is going to be tomorrow. So I can't think of an industry. Priya, if you're going to put me in a spot there, but yeah, there are areas which have taken up AI faster than the others. I'm so glad to hear some great use cases coming in from Rizwan and from TP around what we are doing, the industrial manufacturing and of course the whole industry 4.0. But there's just so many use cases available, and Google Clouds, it's available for everybody to start small, grow big, because we scale to petabyte scale data, health and analytics. We are working on so many healthcare programs with the government, also to make sure that we're able to provide that high compute power. So again, I just feel that it's going to be all across pervasive as we move into the next phase of our lives, post COVID.
Okay. Yes, I hope, inshallah, that comes sooner than later. We're going to open the floor to questions. Tejpreet, I'm going to begin with you because the question is actually a question that I was also going to be asking you, but this has been posed by Prateek Jani. He's asking, you think when you're talking about SMEs, the priority is still on saving costs. So how do you propose a SME to use tech-enabled solutions as an investment rather than cost? Tejpreet.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Priya, because like I shared with you, the camera example was a good example that basically the investment into the camera now, what we're finding is not only to do security, but the application does so much more. But let me also give you another example. We are spending every day, Priya, the time to think on how can these technologies that we develop, especially for the corona, to solve the corona safety problem, how do we apply these technologies in a post-corona world? And I'll share with you a few examples on how we are thinking about it. Now that we know that we have the ability to make cell phones communicate with each other, what if we can drive productivity tools with that technology? So rather than putting large infrastructure, locators, wearable bands, which are more very, very precise technology, the one thing about the cell phone technology is it's really very reasonable, very cheap. You don't need any large technology infrastructure to be installed because your cell phone becomes the infrastructure. However, there is a downside, is the fact that because it's cheap, it's not super, super precise. So for example, when a cell phone comes together, it might vibrate at 1.9 meters, at 2.1 meters, unlike the other technologies which are down to 10, 20 centimeters. However, when you take a step back and you think, how do we use this technology in an MSME, for example, in a post-COVID world, we can use that communication system to track productivity. So are all the workers on a factory floor at the right place at the right time? If you need 200 people on the factory floor, are all 200 there or 150 there? Can we see the time it takes for a person? Can you do a check-in, check-out? That if the machine mechanic is supposed to be there for 1 hour at a stretch, is he there only for half an hour? Is he there for 1 hour? So that's how we're thinking about it, is that how do we take and adopt these low-cost technologies that were adapted really to help us with safety, but start applying it in a post-COVID world. And that's really where I get excited, Priya, because in India, we have to think frugally. We have to think low cost. But I think if we can find these kinds of technologies, low-cost technologies in our kind of a world, then we can take it to the rest of the world. And that's what we did at GE as well. In the healthcare space, we adapted a lot of the fancy technologies we had to develop, really low-cost ECG machines, and then took it to the West. So I think there are a lot of examples like that. So that's how we are trying to do it. We have to solve that particular problem.
Okay, Deepak, I think this is a question that you can best answer by Vivek Nambudripat. He's saying, considering the extensive use of technology that is being used, what kind of protection or fail-safe principles that is being built in to protect the industry and the people in case of natural calamities or even man-made events like ransomware or any other malware?
I will have to sort of get into details on that. But talking about the kind of safety, again, from a technology standpoint, I think we have provided adequate examples of how we can ensure that that employees can remain safe, citizens can remain safe. I think TP spoke about some great examples of some use cases where we could use technology to make sure that people maintain the right distance. Obviously, if there is some early warning system that can be put in place, working along with different weather departments, to help citizens be aware of any of the calamities that are coming through. There are so many key use cases available where technology has now become an enabler rather than a luxury, right? So I just kind of feel that there is just so much that's going on, with regard to what the government is doing, for example, on contact tracing today, just to keep citizens safe, in terms of this current crisis that's going on, whether it is a cyclone warning or whether it is an earthquake warning. So kind of have those early warning systems in place, use of analytics, for example, to know where exactly would the next sort of quake happen. So I think a lot of those technologies are now available to us with the use of analytics and AI that we had even 5 years ago. So again, like I said, I don't necessarily understand the context of this whole ransomware piece. There are so many protective layers on Google. Google's never been hacked, thankfully. But then on the human, on the workforce safety, there are just so many mechanisms, early warning systems that are available today to governments, to organizations around the world that Google's enabling. And analytics is the way to go in terms of ensuring that we are able to take some past history, build models for the future, and ensure that the people are aware of what's going on around them.
Okay. There'd be a question by Vishal Vashishta. In fact, there's been a lot of questions regarding your wristband technology that I'm hearing. Vishal is saying, what sensor technology is working behind the wristband? Is it working on RFID? And the approximate cost of the wristband? That's one question. And then another question by N. Iyer also is asking if any cheaper sensors are available that can be sent, say, on a truck to track down. And will it work when you get it back and reuse it again on the next truck? So,
yeah, Priya, thanks for that question. On both the questions, the answer is on the first question on what is the protocols, we're using BLE. There are a lot of protocols that can be used. There's LoRa, there's UWB, there's BLE. So there are a number of protocols, but we decide to use the right protocol based on what are we trying to solve, what is the use case, what is the application, and what's the budget. So for example, if you're in an outdoor application, moving from A to B or an outdoor good, you might use a LoRa technology, but the LoRa technology is expensive. Then you have UWB technologies, which can also be deployed in the wristbands, but that's really precise, but very expensive. So there are companies in Germany right now that are offering the LoRa wristband, the UWB wristband, and that's ranging between $90 to $150 a wristband. And therefore, I feel it's not the right kind of technology for our country because I don't think people would pay that kind of money. What we have got is lower cost BLE technologies, we've seen wristbands ranging from about 1,000 rupees to about 4,000 rupees, all the way from, do you want to track all my health parameters, heartbeat, pulse, and social distancing, or do you just want to do social distancing? So based on what those applications are, we are seeing a wide variety of cost from 1,000 to 4,000. And on your truck question, absolutely. Again, sensors are very cheap to expensive based on whether you just want to track where the truck is moving, or do you want to track 10 parameters, 100 parameters of the truck in terms of vibration, temperature, pressure, and a whole bunch of other factors as well.
Rizwan, do you want to come in on the truck sensor? Have you got a cheaper alternative than what TP is offering?
No, so I think we're using the RFID piece, right? Because the trucks that actually come into our terminal, they take several trips a month, right? So we just give them an RFID tag, and then it is used very effectively because they come back. They're usually on the same route in that sense, Priya.
Deepak, there's a question from Sudhanshu. He's saying, how do you approach and convince the technology users in the industry 3.0 for a quick upgradation to 4.0? And until 5G is arrived, how do we deal with latency and network drops in critical infrastructure? I think the back to the literally the safe usage problems, really.
Yes, absolutely. No, so I think overall, as we are seeing, I'm just going to take a couple of examples of where we have seen this whole transformation happening, right? I mean, in fact, this is related to one of the questions that was been asked as well. Let's take a construction industry, for example. I mean, it's again, it's very manpower intensive. Again, a whole lot of people in a building or sort of working around an office space. How do you ensure that you sort of bring in the measures through the use of technology by helping them, giving them sort of maybe sensor enabled helmets, or kind of give them aids that can help them in terms of lifting machinery, for example. So there is a whole lot of technological innovation that's happened, not just in terms of the heavy machinery piece, but also in terms of how you could use vision software to identify what object is being picked up, what is the right mix of the cement and the mortar, and so on and so forth. So I just feel that there is just so much industrial revolution that's happening because of the use of AI and ML. Coming to technology, you could use it to what TP mentioned a while back, right? I mean, clouds, of course, the enabler there, the game changer there. You could use cloud for so many different purposes. You could do permutations and combinations. You could actually sort of run high compute to see what kind of an outcome can be expected after a certain sort of raw material have been sort of processed. So I just think that the simulation ability, the ability to predict results, the ability to analyze results is much faster for tech industries today than they were even 10 years ago. So today, with all of the simulations available, we feel that with the TPUs that Google has, we are able to give a lot of results much faster to our customers. So lot of technology enablers and reasons as to why industries are moving. I'll give you one last example of a customer in the power industry who typically send people to sort of do meter readings, and instead of doing that, they're now using vision enabled glasses or helmets to be able to take a meter reading and send out a bill on the mobile phone of a consumer. That's just the way to show how power industry is transforming itself from going from a physical meter inspection to now a smart metering option, where technology plays a role of having your bill sent out on a mobile device. Just some examples, and there are so many of them, but technology is now an enabler to transform industries from 3.0 to 4.0.
Yeah, not being an industry leader myself, I find these examples very interesting. How they help when you get through your everyday lives. So this is an interesting example, Deepak, that you gave us. Tejpi, there's a question from Mr. Baswaraj. He's saying, post-corona, how do you use the existing camera as a long-term application? I mean, you've been talking about using artificial technology, AI, even post-corona days. So this is one of the questions that he wants to ask you.
Yeah, no, I think what I'll do is actually turn it over to Rizwan, because Rizwan he can share a lot of live examples of what they're doing both in India and overseas. But like I shared with you, my quick perspective is on 3 or 4 areas: security and safety, fire, smoke, can we detect that? 2, health. If somebody falls down, can we immediately take action? 3, on a construction site, you have 10,000 contract labor. Where are they? Are they doing the work they're supposed to? How do you monitor that? So I can go on with examples, but I think Rizwan's is a very particular thing on a port on how some of the examples. So I'll turn it over to you, Rizwan.
I think, TP, you've covered it pretty well. The only one thing that I would add is that, how are these cameras also placed, right? So they're also experimenting with drones, for example, right? And ensuring that, we're able to actually cover more ground in specific places which, where a fixed camera is a little difficult to get to, right? And so we're experimenting with drones and cameras in some of our Indian logistic parks, right? And I think very importantly, research on this point that the data that we actually get which TP alluded to, right, is then used to improve the processes. So this is not just about finishing the current process, but it is also about improving the underlying process so that the exceptions become far and few between. So cameras are here to stay, the video analytics is here to stay, the data crunching is here to stay, improvement of process with the help of technology is here to stay. These are things that will actually take us to the post-COVID era as well, undoubtedly.
Rizwan, there's another question that's come for you specifically, which is because of OCR technologies can be used in DP world. What are the gains in terms of productivity, and has it resulted in the loss of jobs? If so, how do you handle that? This is by a gentleman called Mitski.
Right. So here the OCR was really used to make sure that the person from our terminal or from customs or from the shipper's side does not have to necessarily go close to a truck to note down a container number or to note down the truck number or to actually verify it with system data, etc., right? So, sitting in the office, right, you could actually, with help of camera, read with the help of OCR the container number, verify it with the advice that you actually got from the shipper early on, that the cargo is actually on its way to the port, and then match it, and then ensure that the cargo actually is gated into the terminal, right? So this actually helps to actually do things remotely. For example, the authorities, if they want to actually check the container which was checked before it was sealed, and that the contents of the container were not tampered. During the passage from the shipper's factory to the terminal, there's a particular seal number that is actually fixed on the container door. That also needs to be checked. With the help of OCR, we're able to actually check the seal number and make sure that that is captured as a photograph in the record, so that afterwards you can cross-check that the container and the cargo was not tampered. Journey between the shipper's factory and the terminal in that sense, right? And that is proof that actually stays in the system for a long time. So those are technologies and those are applications that actually will continue. So I think that is one thing. The second is, of course, that we have to reskill our people, right? So they had to actually learn how to use the application. They had to learn how to use, the processes that we would need to say there be any exception. So there was reskilling that was done rather than necessarily doing away with that particular job to answer the question as directly as possible.
Fair enough answer. Tejpreet, another one. This one is for you from Mitski. He's saying, can your product scan the WebEx videos and find out if any COVID situation exists for any of the speakers and the videos that are open, since your product is able to scan existing camera feeds? So do any of us have COVID? Are we headed there, Tejpreet?
That's a good idea, Priya. We'll save that for the next version.
I think also, I think most of the questions are over unless there are any more questions. But I want to thank you all for a very fascinating conversation. And also, this, as someone said, in the world of today, it's not a luxury, artificial intelligence, IoT. These are things going to be as part of our daily news as, say, a smartphone. So thank you so much for helping us and explaining to us what the situation is and what we are facing, and the solutions also, which is what I find the most interesting. Thank you so much. Thank you, CII and BLP, for hosting this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Talk soon. Bye. Bye.
And I'm sure that webinar was informative for you all. Our special thanks to all the speakers for their time. Thank you all and stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Sangeeta. Thank you.
Thank you, Sangeeta.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, just want to say that if anybody has any queries which are not resolved, which are we have not been able to address, you can please send it on the email IDs which are given in the screen, and we'll also put the email IDs on the chat box. You can send the questions to us, and we'll connect with the teams, the BLP team, and get the answers. Thank you, everybody.